You're listening to Technology Frustrations and Gimmicks with your host, Aaron Moss.
Welcome to this episode of Technology Frustrations and Gimmicks, the show that educates the lost, the weary, and those that claim to know nothing about computers and technology. I'm your host and computer expert, Aaron Moss. This is episode 5 of 10 total episodes, all dealing with ways to speed up your computer. 101 ways to be exact. Too much info for just one episode, so we've made an entire session our full season full of episodes on speeding up your computer. Please listen to all the episodes to get the greatest benefit. So here we are on to way number 41, and that is to set your hard drive as primary boot device. Now, the way that this actually speeds up your computer is when you turn a computer on, the hardware and the BIOS, which is the very, very first layer of any type of programming that's on the chips, that's running on the motherboard, they suddenly turn on because when you push the power button, they suddenly activate, they turn on, and the first thing that they are programmed to do is to find a boot device. The faster they can find a boot device, the faster the computer will start up and the faster you can start computing. If the BIOS has to search for a bootable device every time, that will actually slow the boot time. So you won't, in the BIOS of the computer, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the BIOS, but one of the basic functions of the BIOS, of course, is date and time, and some very basic settings as to what is the default booting device. So if you set your default booting device to the hard drive or the whatever source is going to be where that it's going to be booting from most of the time, if you set that as the first priority, the computer won't have to go searching for another bootable device. Now, what some people like to do, they like to put their DVD drive or their floppy drive as the first priority. And what that'll do is, in case they ever want to do something special with the computer and boot from a DVD drive, all they have to do is insert it and turn the computer on, and it'll automatically boot to that drive, because what the BIOS will do is it'll first look for a boot device in the DVD drive, and then if none exists, then it will go to the second priority default device, which can be the hard drive. Now, that's fine if occasionally you want to do some special things. You want to boot to other devices, you want to boot into a special DVD drive that has special programming on it, that's perfectly fine. But while the computer is looking for that other boot device, it's taking up time. So, in order to make it boot up the fastest, you want to have the drive that you're using, which is usually your hard drive, main C drive, your main system drive, as your first priority primary boot device. Way number 42, and that is to move. Yeah, I know. You're going to have to pack up and move to a closer high-speed neighborhood in downtown. So a little bit of why this is something to consider is when you see an advertisement on TV for internet service. I'll take CenturyLink as mine because that's what our local DSL here in Tucson, Arizona is. Now, your local DSL provider, whomever it is, whatever name they go by, they may advertise something like 40 gigs of internet speed, for whatever price. And then they have this little disclaimer, this little disclosure in very, very small print that nobody ever sees, and it says not available in all areas. It might as well say not available in most areas, because only certain addresses are able to even get that speed. Okay, so now I just want to go on record by saying this. The DSL companies, they can advertise anything that they want. And, they can fudge the words any way that they want, but as long as they put those disclaimers in there. That's number one. But number two, don't think that DSL is not capable of getting those higher speeds. It just so happens that they will give higher speeds to people that are actually closer to their exchange easements. And I don't actually work for them. They call them different things. They're basically switch boxes that you'll see in the street. So you can be driving down the street, you'll see these big metal boxes, and they call them, they're part of the easement. So they're not really on the sidewalk, they're not really on someone's property. They're usually in that gravel or sand or dirt or grassy area right at the edge of a sidewalk. And it'll just be a ugly green or black or steel metal box that's all locked up. That is where a lot of these switch points are located. They're not located up on the poles. They're not located anywhere. They're in these boxes, and they can be all around town. If you happen to live near one of these switch boxes, then you are at a prime real estate location to receive faster internet by way of DSL. Okay, now this does not apply if you get cable. So cable is different. So cable, you can get the same speed no matter where you are. As long as the cable goes there, they can give you that speed. When it comes to DSL, it's a little bit different. And the reason why they can't offer the higher speeds due to the farther distance you are from these easement boxes is because a phone line can only have a certain speed attached to just one phone line. So a fax line, the old school fax line was 54 kilobits per second. Now, if you can measure what a kilobit is, so a kilobit is, comparing it to like 1 megabit, it would take 100 kilobit, would take 1,000 kilobits to make 1 megabit. So a 54 megabit, which is your average analog phone line, that would translate to 100 times slower than 1 megabit. So theoretically, you could have 100 phone lines running on 1 megabit data line. Just to give you an idea of how much data that actually is in just 1 megabit. But due to the magic of doing things on bandwidths, they can get somewhere up into the 1 megabits all the way up to 5 megabits through that phone line. But the phone lines actually have inherent limits. Once they start I don't know exactly what the limits of the phone line is, but once they start hitting those limits, what they do is they start cascading multiple lines in one cable. So, for example, if there is a customer that lives right next to one of these easements, instead of running your typical single phone line, instead of running just one of these phone lines into your house, they'll cascade, or they're intertwine multiple lines. So instead of giving you 3 megabits, they can give you 6. Or instead of 6 megabits, they can give you 12. And instead of 12, they can give you 24. They can just keep doubling the amount of wires that are flowing through that cable that routes all the way to the house. Okay, that could easily be done if you're living near an easement. And you'll find more of these easements closer to the downtown area of any town that you live in. So the farther out, in the rural areas and the urban, from the urban areas, the farther you are and the farther out you are, or the farther away your neighbors are. If you're living on a road where it's 1 mile between the houses, chances are you're not going to have much of a say-so of how fast your internet is going to be. But if you're living in a big apartment building where you're stacked on top of each other, places like that, you'll be more likely to be able to request faster internet service, only because the easements that may be, the switch boxes that might be in the basement of the building or right near the building, they can easily just reroute or reassign some of these phone lines to cascade into your internet signal that comes into your house. So even where you move, I know that's not practical, but where you live can actually affect your internet speed, or what internet speeds are even available to you. I have a customer of mine. He is the only CenturyLink customer that I know of that actually gets 40 megabits from a DSL signal. And I know, I've tested it. And sometimes when it fails, I've actually had to talk with the tech guys that come out, and that's how I was able to find out all this information. That moves us on to way number 43, and that is to boot into safe mode. Now, this is not always a viable thing to do. You don't want to use constantly be in safe mode, but safe mode is actually a very interesting tool to use, so that you can use the computer in a way so that you're not so that you don't have all of the services running at this particular time. So the computer actually does run faster in safe mode, and it's if you're in the middle of something and for some reason your computer is just chugging along, it's slowing down to a crawl, you can, in a pinch, cut the machine off and boot it into safe mode, and whatever was slowing the computer down at that time is now shut off in safe mode. Now you can take care of everything that you need to do in safe mode, and then you can always go back and fix whatever was slowing down the computer a little bit later. Safe mode is kind of like your it's like your backup tool. If in case you really need to get something done and the computer is just not doing what you want it to do, and you don't have time to figure it out at that time, use safe mode. A lot of people don't know how to get into safe mode on Windows 10. It's not too hard. All you have to do is hold down the Shift key while you push the restart button. And the Windows 10 has several restart button areas. Any of them will do, and I believe in some systems it has to be the left shift button. So your keyboard has 2 shift buttons, and you're probably going to get the result that you want when you push and hold the shift button while you click the restart button on Windows 10. The other way that you can get into safe mode on most systems, most Windows-based systems, is shut the computer completely off, and then while it's off, boot it up and keep tapping the F8 key. When you tap the F8 key, it basically sends a signal to the BIOS that you're wanting to boot to a special in a special way, and it'll get to an area where it'll ask you if you want to go into boot safe mode, and there's also safe mode with networking. There's a low resolution option. There's an option there to boot to the settings that where Windows was best working before. So there's lots of different options in that type of boot. But when you go into safe mode is your friend, where you can get things done quickly in a pinch. Way number 44, and that is to install latest drivers and adapters. So all of the devices, so in manufacturing, yes, you may have a computer, but that computer is made up of lots of parts. Each of the parts may have different manufacturers. So each manufacturer may have the best drivers for their components. And what a driver basically is, it's a very, very small program. Most of the time it's small, but sometimes it can be much larger. But it's usually a very small program that basically tells the computer how to interact with that device. For example, if you were to buy a new printer, you can't just plug the printer into the computer and then it just starts working. There's a piece of software in the computer that actually tells the computer how to communicate with that specific printer. Now, there might be some printers that use the same types of drivers, and there are multiple different drivers that can work on that particular printer. And there are some manufacturers that have model-specific drivers, and then that same company will also have what's called universal drivers, which will work on any of that entire company's line of printers, basically. So that way, if you're ever in a pinch, you could always download a universal driver in the case of a printer, or you can download a model-specific browser that will work for that. Now, that's just printers. There are so many other components and so many other parts of the computer. There are drivers for memory, there's drivers for chips, there's drivers for your processor, there are drivers for the sound, there's drivers for your keyboard and for your monitor and for your graphics. There's drivers for how the USB connections work. All the connectors that are on the motherboard itself, and anything that you plug into the computer has drivers. They have drivers for the connectors, drivers for the way that it is processed. There's also a plug and play thing, like for example, if you were to plug in a USB device while the computer's on, it'll automatically start installing. It's a plug and play device. So although it just starts working, what's actually happening in the background is the computer is identifying the device, looking for a driver that works with that device, and then applies that driver to that device. Okay, it all happens fairly quickly, or at least it's supposed to. And once it finds that driver, that component now can communicate properly with the computer, and it'll start operating properly, hopefully. Now, there are some drivers that will actually will operate the equipment faster. Usually, there's no real way to tell which drivers are actually faster than the others. And what I mean by that is sometimes the original driver, or like the driver that the unit originally came with when it was first released, it might be a 6-year-old driver, but it was the fastest, and it might have been the best for what you're using it for. Now the manufacturer may decide, okay, you know what, we've been having some technical problems with that first driver. We're going to update the driver. We're no longer going to use the old one. We're going to start using this new driver. And then they release this new driver. But the reason why they release new drivers is not always so that they can get better performance from the device. Many times these new drivers are put out to fix bugs that have been reported back to them. So it could be that there is a bug that was actually causing it to operate slowly, and then this new driver actually makes it work faster. Or the reverse may be true. They may have found out that the driver needs to do a little bit more than just this very basic function. And now this new driver, needs to do more with this component and actually make it, the overall experience actually run slower. So if you were to go into Device Manager on any of these computers, you can do that by just hitting Device Manager in the search box at the bottom, or going into the control panel by typing in Control at the bottom of Windows 10, or going into the control panel from the start menu of Windows 7 or Windows 10 or even Windows 8. Just type in the word Control and Control Panel will pop up. So if you find Device Manager within Control Panel, and then you open up Device Manager, you will see a long list of components. Each of the components will have a little plus sign next to it that expands and shows you even more of those types categorized parts. Each one of those opened up areas can be another driver for each one of those components, and the computer knows which drivers go for which components. So if your computer is running okay, you may not want to mess with that, but it may be to your advantage to download what is called a driver updater. The best one that I use is a program called Driver Booster. It's made by a company called IOBit. So if you go to iobit.com, they make a series of other programs. A lot of the programs that they make a lot of good programs, but their driver program is actually very good. They have a free program, and this thing finds a lot of hidden drivers, and it actually updates all of your drivers that are missing, and it'll even tell you which ones are older and out of date. Now, this doesn't always mean that, just like we were talking about, that doesn't mean that you should update all of your drivers, okay? Because sometimes the later update actually makes it perform worse. So you would need to be a little bit on edge as to which ones are not working well. Something that I like to do is, if I happen to suspect that there's a problem with my internet connection, for example, and then I run a driver scanner like Driver Booster, I would always want to make sure that I only check off the ones to be updated that are related to the problem that I'm trying to address, or any performance that I'm trying to address. The same thing would be true, for example, if I'm having trouble with my graphics. I would run the driver program, and I would only check off to update the ones that are driver specific or graphic specific. Okay, so you always want to that's just another tool, another way to speed up your computer experience. And that's it for that for that tip. The next way to speed up your computer is way number 45, and that is to tweak your browser. And tweaking your browser can be extremely involved. I'll have to say that this is a very advanced step, and you might want to consult a professional, or you can take it to YouTube and you can do a search for something like Chrome speed tweaks, or Firefox speed tweaks. And within the program, just like the registry on a computer, there are all kinds of settings. There's hundreds, sometimes even thousands of settings inside of your browser that actually determine how fast things operate. Some of these may include how fast requests are made when you are on the specific fold of a website. For example, let's say that you go to Facebook. Did you know that your browser will not load any more of the Facebook page than what you're viewing at the time? So, for example, when you scroll, down maybe 3 page lengths on Facebook, what the browser is actually doing is it's actually sending a signal back to the Facebook website and saying, hey, Aaron is scrolling down. I need the information that is on the page that is 3 pages down. Okay, that request time and that loading of the page while you're scrolling actually takes time. There is a way to actually tweak your browser so that when you go to a website, it can actually load what you're actually seeing, and a couple of folds up or a couple of folds down. Okay, that's just an example of one of the tweaks. There's all kinds of little tweaks, and it's too much to mention on this one. We can do an entire show just on these browser tweaks. Browser tweaks are huge. Okay, and one of the things that it's something you should definitely look into, do some research about. It is huge with these browser tweaks, and you can go as crazy as you want with these browser tweaks. You can tweak it up all the way to lightning speed if you want, and you can impress your friends a lot when you get it tweaked just right, so that you can get that really, really fast browser experience. Way number 46, and that is to not compress files. So when you are opening files on your computer, the computer actually has a way to compress files, and from time to time, if you're running your hard drive close to capacity, the computer may ask you from time to time, would you like to compress your files? If you click yes, what the computer actually does in the background is it actually starts to find little ways to combine characters and other qualities of your files. And it's the same way, like if you have things in your kitchen cupboard, for example, okay, things that you use a lot. Let's say you have your coffee, and your coffee in a cabinet and your creamer in the refrigerator. Okay, now as long as it's just sitting up there in the cupboard, you're not using it all the time, so it goes up in the cupboard. But what if somebody were to come to tell you, well, is it okay if I come into your house and put your coffee back in a box and seal it back up since you're not using it right now? So no, it's fine just being right there in the cupboard, that's fine. But you see, if they package it up again, or if they seal it up again, nothing's going to happen to the coffee per se, but it's just going to delay the next time you want to open it. The same thing with the coffee creamer. Okay, if they were to seal it up, put it in a box, or put it in the original packaging all over again, you're not really, you might be saving space because they, because that's what the point is, to save space, to, package everything together and push it into a corner to make more space for you. But it doesn't really help you if you're trying to get some more speed, because the next time you request that information, it's going to need to unpack everything and uncompress it, and then so that you can use it. So if the computer is actually asking you to compress things, the real solution is actually to start thinking about investing in more memory. Putting a larger hard drive, cloning the old system into the new one, something like that. Another easier way you can do that is just by getting a large external drive and moving what you can to the external drive, freeing up space on your main system drive. That way it won't ask you for compression. But you don't want to compress files. You always want to leave them uncompressed so that the computer can read them a lot faster. Way number 47 is to clear cookies. Now, clearing cookies is something that you can do from time to time. There might be some settings in your browser that will allow you to clear cookies every time you close your browser, but there's also ways that you can clear cookies manually. Now, the advantage of clearing cookies is so that the websites that you visit don't have to reference previous sessions. If you start fresh every time, it's sometimes you can get things done a lot faster. The way that I can illustrate it is like this. Let's say that you're having a problem with your bank, and you call customer service, and they say, well, we're unable to help you right now, but if you call us back in an hour, we should have the problem resolved. So you call them back in an hour, and you say to them, yes, I was told to call back in an hour. And what is the rep going to say? Well, hold on, let me read the notes from the previous call that you made. And then they put you on hold, right? So they may have been able to help you a lot faster if you didn't even say anything of the original call, but just told them of what the new problem is. So this going back through the sessions of your previous visits to websites is what cookies practically run on. Now, if you're not too particular about websites, remembering information about what you've done on their websites, you can always clear cookies and get that faster, fresh appearance and connection to the website. But don't expect for them to necessarily recognize who you are. There is a bad thing about, there is a drawback. I wouldn't say bad, but there is a drawback of clearing your cookies too often. Websites that you do want to remember you're going to have to enter in your password all the time, and there are some places online that you would actually want the cookies to be there. Now, there are some areas in the computer where you can actually decide which cookies to keep and which ones to erase. So you can do that inside of Internet Options, inside of Control Panel. That's what it's there for. If it's something very, very specific, to me, it just takes more time and it's more tedious work to go through the long list of cookies, checking and unchecking things that you want erased and not erased. But the thing that I would have that I would suggest in that case is either you're going to erase them all or keep them all. But if you decide to erase them all, if you want to do it more and more often, the best way to counter that is to have a good auto password filler. Okay, so the browser may have its own. There are other good programs that are out there. You're going to have to do your own digging around as to how secure these systems are, because these systems, there are tons of these systems, RoboForm, Dashlane, and others that work great, but you just have to make sure that they don't getting into your personal things. And I have not heard of any case, but I haven't heard any cases where that has actually happened, but the potential is there and the technology is there as well. Way number 48, and that is to disable Windows updates. Yes, I know it's terrible for me to say not to update your Windows, but did you know that Windows most of the time only sends out updates to really benefit them most of the time? They're really not there for your benefit. It's really there for their benefit. Software companies, and Microsoft is one of the largest ones out there. They like to they get bug reports all the time, so they have to constantly put out updates to resolve these bug issues. But from time to time, more often than we would hope that it would happen, a bad bug, they can be trying to fix one problem, but it actually creates another problem in some systems. And then they get bug reports on that, and then they have to fix that, and they may knock something else out of kilt somewhere else in their programming. So then they have to make another update for that. So it's a vicious cycle. It's a never-ending thing. There's always some sort of bug, happening in the computer. Now, why would you want to disable Windows updates? Well, some of the things that the updates will do many times will slow the computer down. or at least it will seem like it slows the computer down. Number one, it slows the computer down while it is actively installing. That's number one. And number two, since a lot of these updates are not designed for better performance, but they're really designed for better security and better privacy, things that the software company is interested in, because it's what their users are interested in. So if they're going to put something in that's going to make it more secure, more than likely it's also going to slow the computer down. Higher security almost always equals slower performance. And this goes with anything. If you increase the security at an airport, guess what? Everyone else has to come to get on the plane earlier, just so that they can go through all of the security, because it takes longer. So anytime you improve something or make something more secure, it always will go slower. It would always make it slower. So you always want to make sure that if your computer is running fine, exactly the way you want it, and you don't want it to change, that is an excellent reason for you to disable Windows updates. Way number 49, and that is to not use Microsoft Security Essentials. Now, I'm not saying to not use Microsoft or Windows Defender, which is an excellent program, by the way, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But Microsoft Security Essentials is a antivirus and protection software that came with Vista and Windows 7 and a lot of operating systems at that time. Microsoft Security Essentials was used a lot by businesses, and there were some versions of that program that were actually pretty good. But just like in our previous tip, they actually accepted bad updates. Microsoft would put an update on Microsoft Security Essentials. It would make the computer run terrible. It would make it slow. It would make it do so much more in the background trying to keep the computer secure. And it worked terrible. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to remove Microsoft Security Essentials back in the day when, in Windows Vista and Windows 7. And after you remove Security Essentials, the computer would start working no problem. The best way that Microsoft Security Essentials was actually working correctly was when it was managed by like a large IT firm, and there was an IT person there that knew when was the right time to actually run the to run the update, because Microsoft would put out a bad update and then later on realize it, put in another update to fix the problem that they caused, and then eventually with 5 or 6 tries, then they find the right update, and then they'll send out a notice for all the IT people that take their computer seriously. This one is the one. Go ahead and update it from there. So if you are still running Windows Vista or Windows 7 or anything a little bit older that still came with Microsoft Security Essentials, remove it. It's slowing you down. Okay, way number 50, and that is to assign a static IP. What is that? There are 2 types of... Okay, when you connect your computer to an internet connection, every internet component has what's called an IP address or Internet Protocol address. Okay, those addresses are either need to be assigned in some way. Okay, it's like for example, an IP address is basically a group of 4 3-digit numbers. For example, 192.169.0.1. That could be an example of an IP address. Okay, the computer sitting right next to that could be 192.168.0.2, and you have 192.168.0.3, 168.0.3, which is the printer sitting right next to those. That's just a way how IP addresses can be assigned. So IP addresses can be assigned manually, and that's called static, or they can be assigned automatically, which is called dynamic. One of the things that the static way, or to assign addresses statically, is that whenever you connect a computer to an internet connection, you don't have to wait for the router to automatically assign it an IP address. You connect it, the router sees that computer identity as being on that specific port, or with a specific identification, and it assigns it immediately, a whole lot faster than it does with if it has to assign it automatically or dynamically. Now, your router also has its own identification to the internet. Now, so when I say that you should have your IPs set with a static IP, it doesn't mean to call your internet service provider and tell them that you want a static IP, which is a little bit different. So if you have a static IP from your internet service provider, number one, they might charge you for it because it's a little bit more desirable to have a static IP or an IP address that never changes. It also has certain advantages to having a static IP or an IP address that never changes, because you can log into your computers using the Microsoft desktop sharing feature. It also comes into play if you're ever using a VPN or any type of software to dial into any of the computers that you have in your network. It would be great if that IP address never changed. There are some services out there where it will report back to you if the router IP address ever changes, and it'll resync up to the correct IP address. But that's getting a little bit too complicated for this podcast. But basically, you want to know that having a static IP address basically allows the computer to connect to your router faster when you're actually plugging it in and connecting. Okay. Otherwise, you may have to wait sometimes up to a minute in some cases before it actually assigns it an IP address and then passes that internet connection through to your device. If your device is already set up as a static IP address, okay, it'll just connect and it'll be connected within seconds rather than minutes. Well, that's it for this episode of Technology Frustrations and Gimmicks, which is sponsored by Computer Doctor of Tucson, which is a licensed desktop and laptop service and support center. We work on all makes and models of computers up to 20 years old. If you are on a tight budget, enroll in our rent-to-own program on laptop and desktop systems for families, schools, and businesses with tech support included. You can call their main number at 520-261-5508 or visit our website at computerdoctor.xyz. Computer Doctor of Tucson, where they always take good care of you. I know because it's my company. Let us know you're listening by making a comment or clicking the like button, or even asking a tech question that you would like to see in our upcoming episodes starting in Season 2. Stay tuned for more episodes of our show. Until then, see you next time.
This episode of Technology Frustrations and Gimmicks is sponsored by Computer Doctor of Tucson, because technology is great when it works. For more of our podcasts, visit techshow.xyz or wherever you listen to your podcasts.